so much for being here. Thank you so much for the career you have. It's amazing what you have achieved, what you have done, and we are really glad to have you here and to hear from you all the achievements that you have. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here and excited to be part of this whole initiative. And it's exciting to see what's happening throughout Mexico and Latin America, and just the global penetration of cannabis education as it stands. So I'm very honored to be here.
Well, Chris here is the founder and CEO of Medical Marijuana 411. And as I told you off camera, Chris, please finish introducing yourself. A book author, researcher, and one of the most important leaders in education, cannabis education industry.
A great business.
Yes, a great businesswoman. So go ahead, please. Who is?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for turning that over. Well, I am the CEO and founder of Medical Marijuana 411. I am also the author, but I hate to say I take full credit for this book, Medical Cannabis Handbook. Published by Springer Publishing, because it took a village of people much smarter than myself to help author it, and with all the research. I think my biggest contribution to the cannabis space has been to offer what we see as the most value is education, right? We come at it in a little bit different way. Is where we started was that we wanted to make sure that not only did we align with government, which sounds odd, but we wanted to make sure that those going into it knew the law, knew the regulations, and most importantly, knew the research and the science behind the plant. Where we're a little bit different is that we came out of it from the outside coming in. And I think, like most people in this conference, it always starts with one conversation. There's one patient that resonates with who you are, what you do, why this is a viable option for healthcare, right? And so it's kind of interesting is that we took that, and then for me, where I come from is now building the largest global leader in cannabis education.
And please, I want to start with this. You said it perfectly. It all starts with a conversation. For you, maybe it was a patient. For me, it was him. He's the guilty one. He's responsible for logging as another initiative, a Mexican education initiative in cannabis. And this summit started, as you said, with just one conversation. And I'm pointing fingers at him. So I loved the way you started, and well, Chris, let's start this conversation.
Sounds great.
What challenges have you faced with your project? This cannabis education project, the biggest in the world. Tell us about it. What challenges?
It's interesting because I think, like anyone venturing into the space, whether you've been in it a while or new to it, is that the hoop jumping and the problems are large, and you have to quickly learn how to pivot. And honestly, our challenges started very early on, and a quick kind of where we came from is 11 years ago, my business partner and I, he's a racer and a stuntman, which is kind of crazy. But at that point, there wasn't a lot of information. And here he's racing at Bonneville Salt Flats, and we're doing all this cool stuff. And he turned to me and he was telling me a story about his grandma Connie and how in the last 6 months of her life, she had found relief from cannabis and had a better quality of life than the previous 2 years. And I said, my brother, I'm originally from Colorado. My brother has a rare form of arthritis. He's used cannabis for years for pain. Did I understand it? No, but I certainly could see how it improved his quality of life. My mom, at that point, she was 85. She's 90, almost 95 now. Uses topicals for her arthritis. So at that moment in time, 11 years ago on the Salt Flats in Bonneville, Greg, his name is Greg, tasked me to build a website, because what we found is that there just wasn't a lot of information. There was a lot of culture information, so kind of that inside the bubble conversation, but what we really didn't have is that what is the patient story? Why does it work? Where's the research? What's out there? And what we quickly found is that the medical professionals, what is it? 78% of medical professionals aren't even trained on the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system is our largest receptor system, and I'm sure you're going to hear a lot about that conversation in the next few days. So my next question, being a businesswoman and building other companies, is how are we going to monetize it? And he said, don't worry about it. And we have other businesses that we were doing. We've known each other 20 years. Well, oddly enough, and it was that very pivotal moment in time, he introduced me to my now husband. I moved to Washington State, and I happened to be at the right place at the right time at a cannabis mixer, for those in the industry. And honestly, the big question is, you've been in the industry 11 years. How do I not know who you are? We had to be careful because of Greg's, honestly, his business. We just couldn't attach him to the brand yet. And so snap to 2014, built a social media following of over 1 million fans. We have a huge reach because we knew that we were resonating with that patient story. Again, that mixer in Washington, we heard that Washington State would require consultants, bud tenders, to have a formalized certification by a state approved program. So that brings us to biggest problem number 2 is I've been in technology most of my career. So we were not going to have what the state had outlined in in-person classroom scenario. 20 hours for people, the dispensary owners to release employees didn't make sense, right? So we pitched an online version and we were denied. So we'd spent several $100,000 to now get denied and not be able to launch at all. And there were no other programs at that time on our platform. That was the first one. That was our entry. So my husband put up a whiteboard in our dining room. I found a loophole in the law and we reapplied and we got it approved. So that was our first entrance into cannabis education. But we've always maintained you go into our courses and you can click on an EndNote, which you can then look at the actual cited research. So anybody who wants to take a deep dive, they can. That brought us to problem number 2. Our banking was shut down. I mean, we hear this all the time. Banking's a problem. You're dealing with a Schedule I drug, even though we do not touch any plant material. We're only on education. We don't even have sponsored banner ads on our site. But problem number 2, banking. We lost credit card processing a couple different times, and being an online education company, that's kind of a big problem, right? Yeah. We decided that the medical community was where we would focus early on, aligning with government, which I know sounds odd, but again, it was the legalese. We needed those medical professionals, those consultants. What is it? 94% of the bud tenders say they give medical advice. That is against the law. They cannot give medical advice. They cannot take the place of a physician or your primary care, right? So that's part of the teaching. And also, again, it's the Wild West, not only in the US, but all over the world. Every country, every state has their own rules and regulations, from what are approved ailments to how to medicate. It's crazy. So the big problem for us is that we wanted to really go after the accredited courses. So the American Medical Association has approved our course in category 1, which is the highest level of continuing medical education credits. And although I'm incredibly proud of that feat, the problem with that course is because of the Schedule I status, we can't be as fluid in our conversation about dosing and how to medicate. Our medical professional advanced course, I don't want to say it's a better course, but we can talk very openly about edibles, start low, go slow, how to medicate, what is a dab? It's the terms that we need to destigmatize to make sure a medical professional understands. Again, back to the patient. The patient is leading the conversation. They're coming into offices to talk to medical professionals, and they don't even know what they're talking about. And it goes, again, always back to the patient. Patient leads the conversation. The medical professional hasn't been trained properly in medical school. We fill that gap and then honestly open up the why it works. What's the science behind the plant? So those are kind of the big hurdles, everything from banking to stigma to Schedule I to all of it, and every day you worry. It's still not easy.
Whoa, well, for an industry as complex as this, and I'm taking the first phrase of our next question.
Yeah, something that is really interesting is you have to put 11 years ago.
Yes.
11 years ago was pretty much nothing. I mean, the industry starts like.
Yeah, I mean, the first big opener, not taking into account Uruguay, was Colorado, which is just 7 years away. I mean, you are a pioneer of pioneers in cannabis education. So it's truly amazing what you have done and what you have done.
A visionary.
Yes, a visionary.
Thank you.
Okay, so what are the actions that allowed you to be a source of education for the medical industry? I mean, you talked about it sort of was the only available choice that you had to walk with the authorities. But then again, we're talking 11 years ago, there wasn't nearly enough research as we have today. So how did you, who was this colleague or group of colleagues or the medical profession that encouraged you and guided you through this process?
It was hard, let's put it that way, because you're exactly right. There is not enough research. There's still not enough research. That's the biggest problem. You look at where the research happens, and it's from the cannabis that comes out of Tennessee, right? Or Mississippi, excuse me. And it's government regulated, and it's terrible. It's not the quality what you see in a regular dispensary, or what people that are very well versed with horticulture now that are growing, and the different strains and the complexity of the plant. But it always goes back to, and it always intrigues me, because all of us had to start at that one place in time where we kind of understood it. We saw a patient or a family member or a friend that was having a positive reaction. You saw people minimizing the use of opioids. We have a huge opioid crisis right now, right? And the stats are 25% of the medically legal states in the US, they've seen a direct correlation of 25% reduction in deaths and prescriptions written. In adult use states that are in the US, that number goes up to, I think, close to 32%. I may be not 100% on that, but close, it's still higher, which means that people are using cannabis for their own health and wellness to minimize the use of something that honestly could kill them, right? So, and pain management is the number one reason why people are using cannabis. It's interesting to me because even I grew up in Colorado, now live in Washington, so very open about cannabis use, and saw my own family members, and my brother Rick, who actually now is our VP of technology, and I know he's on this call. I saw his name pop up. So hello, Rick. Thank you for all that you've done for me and the industry, because you were the influence. But it's interesting. You always have to go back to what we have now, and it's research. You have to go back to people much smarter than myself. I'm not a doctor, but I certainly know that I was good in school, and I could find the citations to write a paper. So what we looked at is what we were hearing were the most common thread of, I don't understand how to medicate. I don't know what my patient's talking about dosing. I don't understand with a botanical why they would need to keep a journal. It was very common questions, right? And so we kind of aggregated those and made sure the research was there. We don't add conjecture. We let, again, the medical professional make their own decision of, is it an option for their patient? Because it is not a perfect medicine or a plant. There's certain things that you need to know about signs of abuse and misuse. I mean, again, I'm not going to say that it's the perfect line, but kind of back to where 11 years ago is that my business partner and I talk about this a lot, because we came from outside the bubble, right? The world back then was inside the bubble. So you had pioneers on the legalization trail, making it possible for a woman in Washington now be the CEO of an education company, right? On cannabis. But, it's complex every day. I think the other piece that I think all of us can resonate with was a year ago, almost exactly at this date, is COVID, right?
Yeah.
And that I had an opportunity to go to a Canatech conference in Cape Town at the end of November in 2019. Again, it's those moments in time where you meet the right person that like you guys, how thankful am I that we have now met? But COVID hit. I had made the right connection with Trenton Birch, who is the CEO of Ciba Africa, and now our global partner in all of Africa. We were the first mover with Ciba in Africa to offer cannabis education on the continent. We now have accredited courses, because that was the other push, is we align with government. We want the medical institutions to trust us, right? So those courses are now accredited. They now have a campus that opens next week outside of Johannesburg, and kind of a blended learning concept, which we'll adopt. But through those conversations, we were able to go globally. Now, snap to, we have a fantastic partner. Kurt Hahn, a managing director and president of Medical Marijuana 411 globally, has single-handedly, with his lovely wife, Key, who I adore, tackled the Asian market. Now, talk about a market that's complex, right? It's been a monumental task. All of our courses are now translated into Japanese. What that market brought to us is now, so that is big, right? And hard, but we were all at home anyway. So in my sweatpants, I could actually, work with them to get the Japanese translations done, right? But what that market brought is we are close to being approved. And again, it's early stages. Again, it's going to be a slower market, but the Thai Medical Council is vetting out our courses, which we know will meet all their requirements. Again, always based on science, always based on research. We're not, spewing vision here, right? But the Asian market brought in like hemp, a much bigger focus on hemp and wellness for us that I would have missed, honestly. So, oh, sorry.
I don't know.
Yeah, no worries. So that has brought in a level of, depth to what our offerings are. It's interesting of where that Asian culture. And then the other piece that happened in COVID is Brian Schell, who's on this call. And he reached out, and he is based in Paris. So we have soft launched our European side of our business with our courses. All of the medical courses, he and his team on the pharmaceutical side have translated them into French. So we'll be launching in the French market, and we'll work with the equivalent of the health ministry there on adapting those courses. And now Mexico. This is a $9+ billion market. You can't even tell me how thankful I am for this conversation and where we can go in Mexico and Latin America. And we do have early courses translated into Portuguese. We launched in Brazil about 6 years ago with a fantastic partner, CEC Medical, but it was a little early. And so we need to revisit that market again. But again, we saw two things. The world became very small a year ago, right? And I would have never thought as a CEO and an entrepreneur that I would ever, going to Cape Town was scary, let alone looking at, okay, let's build out our courses globally. Well, it's not so scary anymore, and we've done it. There's no other competitor or company in the cannabis education space that has more accredited courses, has gone global, has done all the translations, has the research-based citations, and approved in more US states than anyone for those states that require certifications. So there we go. So that's kind of the actions that, it's back to the question, where we came to be the source for not only the medical industry, but there's three legs: patient education, because we want to offer great courses for patients very affordably. We have a fantastic Cannabis 101. Again, the science, why does it work within your body? What's the endocannabinoid system? What are CB1 and CB2 receptors? What's the difference between CBD and THC? How does CBD mitigate the not so good effects of THC? that leg. We have the consultant certification, how to make sure that that patient going into a dispensary, that first interaction of a medical professional's patient, you want that patient safety to be forefront, right? So we have the best bud tender certifications anywhere in the world, and I will stand by that every day. I mean, I know the reviews, bud tenders think they know it all. Honestly, they're sometimes a younger demographic, and they think like, geez, I have to take this stupid course. And they get in it and they actually like it. They're like, wow, this course is legit. I'm like, I know. So, and then the medical professional, that certainly, there's a huge gap there worldwide, right? I mean, we have left them out on the fringe of information, and hopefully that's where we can fill not only the comfort level and the understanding. And again, it always goes back to the science. You know, that's how a medical professional thinks we need to fill that gap.
That was a great answer, Chris. And it takes us to our next question, which is...
Yeah. She's just, I hear Mexico.
Yeah, exactly. Do I hear Mexico? Do I hear logic slash medical marijuana 411, something like that? I mean, what are your perspectives, Mexico and other Latin American countries? But let's talk precisely about Mexico.
Well, again, the New Frontier group obviously will fill this. So make sure all of you to watch that presentation, because their content and their statistics and what they've done for the industry is just amazing, right? I can't even just tell you how proud I am to be in a conference alongside of them, right? But with a multi-billion-dollar industry and just newly emerging, how can you ignore that? And what I found through COVID and through our other global partners over the year is that, again, it's that same thread, same questions, and there's no difference. There's an anxiety level for the medical professionals. And I know we talked about this, Ricardo, is that there is a fear, right? I mean, it's now fear-based of, my patients talking about cannabis. We're about ready to legalize. What does that mean as it will impact my practice, right? So again, we hope through great partners, because I can't do it alone, with Logix. I mean, certainly I am excited about this emerging partnership and being able to launch sooner than later. And then the other piece is also the notice, the need and the requirement that we have to recognize the law. Now, all of us are going to have issues with the drug scheduling. There's always going to be a problem, right? It's a Schedule I drug, and we have to deal with that. I hope that the rescheduling happens sooner than later, but I got to tell you, I'm not as optimistic as a lot of people. But looking at Mexico is, how do we show the government and government officials that we're going to abide by the law and teach the law as part of our rollout? No one's ever going to say that education is bad, right? So it's one of those things that we have to pioneer that piece and not be too inside the bubble, and make sure that what we are representing also represents where the, you know, kind of where that baseline is a little bit. I think that's a responsibility for us as the on the education side.
Agree. And Chris, I asked you earlier if I could do this question. I'm going to do it right now, which is, us as Mexican citizens, as future businessmen, as patients, as doctors, as of today, March the 25th, can we find value in medical marijuana 411 platform? Is there something for us today that after the summit, because we want to know more, and something that we can use today? Yeah.
So there are three what I call foundation courses that we have. Now, they cover the federal US law, and we do have then the states that are more granular, and we would do a similar application for Mexico, Colombia, Puerto Rico, Brazil. You know, you take it from the macro legal to the micro legal, right? And all of our courses are very modular, so we can insert what those pieces are. but from a, I hate to use the word generic, but there really isn't a better term. They're for patients, the Cannabis 101. It goes through the complexities of the science. All of our courses are very visually inspired. I don't know if you can see, like even the graphics behind me, those are some of the types of graphics that you can download directly from the course. There's video to help demonstrate key points. For example, like Dr. Jake was on earlier, I think right before me. Dr. Jake Felice is on our advisory board. Love him. He's amazing. And he has a fantastic video that's on our YouTube channel on terpenes, right? So in the terpene section, we would also have his video to help supplement that content. So Cannabis 101 for just somebody who's cannabis curious, a very affordable course, and the complexity of the course and depth of the course is excellent. I mean, it's just, I'm very proud of that course. So for someone who's now wanting to get into the industry, that bud tender or consultant, the dispensary technician or cannabis consultant, you can search on our site, bud tender. It's that I want to get into the industry. I need to go back to the law. I want to know what I can and cannot do working with a patient within that visit. And then the medical professional, we do have the accredited courses for nurses, pharmacists, and physicians and physician assistants. We're approved, and again, in more states for either the consultant certification, if that's the requirement, or the medical, if that's the requirement for the state government. But we have a course called the medical professional certification that, in my opinion, and what we hear from people taking the course, is that because it goes into such great detail on dosing and how to medicate, and there's graphics and again, great videos and downloadable graphics that you can use in your course, and then supplemental materials that you can buy, cannabis handbooks. And this is Springer Publishing, largest medical publisher in the world, but it's gorgeous. It's something that you can open up to a patient. Whoop, I can't get it right, and they can see. It's like,
yeah, look at the book.
So it's something that across the desk or, with a patient, you could literally open up and go, causes of death by drug. Oh, cannabis, 0. It helps alleviate those concerns. And again, those medical professionals, our courses through Brian's efforts, our managing director in Europe, we know that they meet the requirements for I don't know the actual classification, but it's the European equivalent of the AMA, American Medical Association. So those credits, if you're needing, as a medical professional, needing continuing education credits, you can achieve those through their courses as well. So, yes, so to answer your question, and because we truly are an online educator, we're not a Zoom educator, and not that this is bad. This is our life, and I love it because you get to do this thing. But if you were to order a class today, you get an email into your inbox, you click on that, and you start immediately. It is truly adult learning. And the other big thing is we guarantee your satisfaction. In 6 years, we've never had a return, ever. People love our courses.
Wow, that's amazing.
That is amazing.
Well,
about those topics that we can find for Mexico, but what other topics can be found in the Medical Marijuana 411 platform?
Well, up and coming. So we talked about kind of the 3 legs, the patient education, and we have some HIV, AIDS courses, pain management, sleep topicals. They're smaller courses. We have a CBD, an advanced CBD course that is gorgeous and so rich and deep that will launch by the 1st of April. So watch for that. We have a CBD and Pets. I know that, again, the looking at the agenda and the speakers is the veterinary market is just enormous. And it's funny that veterinarians are actually statistically taught more about the endocannabinoid system than medical people doctors, And it's like, okay, well, that's a good thing, but still states don't recognize that veterinary is an option. And so we have a CBD and Pets course that's authored and brilliant. I just got to get it to our design team to get that finished up. And then thanks to Kurt and Key out of Asia, we have a hemp and it's what we call the folklore course, because it goes into the history of hemp throughout Asia and textiles, and just it's just fascinating, right? And that launches by Monday, probably. I'm just going back through a couple of the designs just to tweak a few things, but other than that, but you're going to get your patient information, you're going to get your medical professional, you're going to get your bud tender education. We are aligning with some universities because I see that our role going forward will be a compliance company, where we're going to offer, the cost of violation is great in this industry. So you have to make sure that you understand the compliance, right? And so we will be, and whatever market it is, Mexico, Latin America, Japan, US, compliance, we will be known a year from now, 2 years from now as a cannabis compliance company.
Wow. The cannabis compliance company, that's huge. And I mean, it's not one of the questions that we have, but regarding compliance, are you already going in the US, and have you thought in Mexico of the legal counseling, or is it just a research initiative?
More in the, I would think more business compliance. One of the things we did very early on is an investment into one of the best learning management systems out there, right? And we know a lot of worldwide global companies use it for their HR, when an employee starts, making sure that their training records are in there. That's where we'll dovetail with looking with our relationship in Mexico, is that we would, my dad taught me this at a very early age. It's like, align yourself with people smarter than you, right? Because it makes you look better. I mean, that's the bottom line.
It's also kind of you, and that's why you're coming here.
So I tend to do that pretty well, because if it was just me, I'd be a big hot mess. But so we look to, make sure that our partners are the experts within that arena. Obviously, with your involvement, Mexico, that's where we would develop with subject matter experts like yourselves, those type of opportunities and education pieces.
That's great. Okay, that takes us to our next question.
And this is interesting.
Yes. Okay. The U.S. Congress, you'll be the first one to talk about this topic with us, Chris. The U.S. Congress, in the U.S. Congress, there's a debate about the federal cannabis reform. How do you feel the issue will evolve in the following months, and the effects in case it is achieved?
This is such a hard one, and it's unfortunate because, here obviously I'm in the industry. I fight every day for even on what I have to do as a business owner in the industry, and not being able to do the things that other people can do outside of the industry, even advertising and things that people are surprised by, right? But you look at that drug schedule, by definition, with cannabis as a Schedule I drug, leaves the whole issue, right? And I think that if you would have asked me this question a week ago, I would have been more optimistic. But even with our U.S. president right now, who Vice President Harris has historically been very pro-cannabis and talked very openly about being, let's legalize the whole bit. Well, when it came down over the last few days that the White House is firing people that used cannabis, even in legal states with conditions, I think that's a problem. So because you're telling the truth, you're using cannabis as an alternative in legal states, and even if you're a rec user in a legal state, now you're going to get fired because you were telling the truth. I don't know. I just don't think that reaction this week was good. And Americans for Safe Access actually did a really good opinion piece yesterday, came out, or the day before. It's just inconsistent, right? That conversation is inconsistent. And that's, if you know me at all, where I have trouble is inconsistencies. And so you hear one thing and you kind of, jump on the bandwagon like, yay, we're going to get there. We're going to actually get the scheduling correct. And then it just, something happens, whether it's money motivated, politically, whether it's, I haven't read it yet, so this is me just kind of seeing some news blurbs this morning. But now even in legal states, limiting and trying to put caps on THC. And there are people that don't understand, it's not inherent that CBD is good and THC is bad. And for a lot of people, again, THC, you have to have the full plant. And if the science was opened up and we had more research, I think that would change the conversation. So I don't know if that answers the question. Really, if anything, it kind of muddles it, but I'm not as optimistic that I think we're a long way away still.
Okay. Well, we'll have to see what happens now. Does that evolve? And well, Chris, we've arrived to our section of yes and no questions.
Yes or no?
Yes or no? Fire away. Chris.
Hey, so technically there's two questions there, so I can answer twice. So is there enough medical education about cannabis? Is it current? No, there is not enough, even on our platform, right? We're challenged every day that you have to pivot, you have to push, you have to reinvent. Again, that hemp and folklore course is a great example. Oh, and we've partnered with Citation out of Israel, one of the leading psychedelics organizations based on science and research, fits right into our framework. But we have a Beyond Stigma Fundamentals of Psychedelics course. So the conversation of all of this is always emerging. So is there enough education? No. And is there one that's reliable? I'm going to say yes, because I do know what we have. Again, we guarantee it. It's based on research. It's not based because I like cannabis and found relief because my ankle hurt after my workout and used a topical. It's based on science, right? So if I look at my own little micro bubble, yes, we are reliable.
Let me ask you something about this second semi-question about the reliability of information out there. I'm sure before they knew you, many people used YouTube and blogs and other video sources of information. And you just said it yourself. Yours is reliable information, and I'm sure there's also other sorts of reliable information out there. But how do you make that distinction? What can you tell us to your viewers right now in regards to that? How do they identify what is reliable information when it's not on your platform, if they want to?
Well, within our courses specifically, is that the American, look at our accredited courses. The American Medical Association has very stringent guidelines on what can be a research citation, right? It has to have a number of participants. There's certain rules around that, because you can't have 3 people that use cannabis and had a positive relief, and that's a study, right? And there's lots of those because there isn't enough research. So there's a lot of conjecture, personal anecdotal conversations, which absolutely are important, right? And we will have those on our blogs. We will tell the patient's story. We feel that that's important, and it is reliable. Back to the coursework, is that here's a great example, is that Dr. Ethan Russo, very well known, very credible, physician and expert within the cannabis industry. We had to pull out some of his research within our accredited courses because he sat on, I'm not even going to put it out there, but it's one of the pharmaceutical boards, right? And that, by definition, for an accredited course, reliability becomes problematic. It becomes, can't think of the word, conflict, right? Yes. And so certain things like that, you have to meet those reliability guidelines. And we were a little bit looser because we wanted to talk about the Jamaican women's study of using cannabis teas for everything from menstrual cramps to morning sickness, and what they found is that there was no adverse effects to the children as they grew, and they came back for, I think, close to 18 years to check in on developmental, status of those children, right? So, but that we'll include in our non-accredited course, because we think it's a very important part of the conversation, and it is research. But could that be an accredited course? Absolutely not. But is it reliable? Yes.
Great. That's a great answer, because that's something that we have, all of us have to learn to discriminate between information, and not everything that's not credited is bad, and even not everything that's can get is good either. I mean, for example, let me talk about Mexico. Here in Mexico, there's a way of registering some courses, and not all of them are good. And some of the courses that we know of, they're not registered.
Who's verifying the information, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And that takes us to our one of the last questions. Oh, I love this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is
Are universities in the United States providing quality education about the benefits of cannabis? And don't hold on, please. Speak freely.
Did I lose you guys? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, lost you for a second. So missed part of it, but the university question is really interesting, because we are definitely getting courted by some of the top universities, even as far as Barcelona through Brian. So the conversation is coming. So that's the good news. The bad news is historically it's 9% of medical schools have cannabis in their curriculum. So of course, if they don't have in the curriculum, a doctor can't be trained or educated on the endocannabinoid system, the largest receptor in your body, right? 85% of medical professionals feel unprepared to talk about cannabis with their patients, which obviously that's the lack of education in the university setting. I think it'll get there. That's the positive. Certainly we want to be part of that. And I think that you really have to look at, again, the expansion of the right curriculum, making sure that not only is the science of the plant covered, but accounting, business practices. Again, the cost of violation is so high in this industry, is that you have to make sure that you understand all the pieces of it, from security. Oh, the other piece that Kurt, our president, and myself we are the chairpersons for ASTM, which is a global standards company, in writing the standards for the D37 for the medical professional and the consultant. It's in what they call the distribution category, but I think it's going to be renamed, because distribution by name sounds like, how to deliver cannabis, but that's not it. It's literally how are the education role, and what are the standards globally that a medical professional and a consultant need to have from probably the worldwide leader in standards. What are those criteria, which I think will lead the university conversation as well.
Unfortunately, we've arrived to the last minute. Chris, you're amazing, incredible woman, and an excellent speaker, I might add, which is not surprising. We have to keep on. We have to keep on talking. Unfortunately,
but education is the base of everything.
Yes.
We can't think about an industry if education is not first.
Yes.
So those who are thinking about education, this is a great story to follow, because it's the way you can open a market.
Yes.
If it's not education there, it's gonna be really, really hard to think there is something.
Agreed. And here's a hack for everyone either watching us or listening to us. Any and every businessman in cannabis industry that we have interviewed, that most of them are rich already, they said, we started with education. In cannabis, there's no other way to start. It's not, start making and then get acquainted in the process. No, with cannabis industry, it starts here with you, Chris. Thank you very
Well,
much.
thank you. Of course, can't wait to watch the rest of the speakers over the next couple of days. Thank you for all that you're doing. And again, extremely grateful to be here and the next steps in Mexico. Here we go.
Thank you.